it's not being around the wealthy people or being around the fit person that makes you fit. It's that they make you uncomfortable with where you're at.
Right.
So like, for instance, if I'm around a whole bunch of people that are ripped and I'm not ripped, either A, I'm going to feel so uncomfortable that I leave, or B, I can take the medicine and go get fit with them. Welcome back to the Leaders Only podcast, where we talk about business, leadership, mindset, and just pretty much anything revolved around building an incredible life. You know, one of the reasons that I started this podcast is because I felt like on the way to where we're at now, there wasn't really a place to go to learn tangible skills that are needed in order to succeed and further yourself and just get better overall in every area of your life. And so some background about me, I built a sales company that does over 8 figures a year. I own over $10 million worth of real estate, and I've built a multiple 7-figure income that's streamlined and in all honesty doesn't really need me. I plan on teaching you and documenting everything that I learned along the way. And if you get something out of today's message, if you can do me a favor, if you can like, share, and subscribe, it will give us the ability to further our message and help more people, which is what we're all about. Thank you guys so much. Let's dive in. Today we have another version of the Q&A, the question and answer episode. And you guys have the ability to submit your questions to us, and we'll actually answer them on this show. So if you go to Instagram and you send us a DM with some of the questions, and or you can go to YouTube and drop it in one of the comments, and we'll answer it here on this show. But with that being said, I got my right-hand man, my brother, Knott over here. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back, brother. How are you? You just got back from Mexico, right?
Yeah, we were in Cabo for about a week.
Nice. I missed the invite on that one.
Yeah, I know. I forgot to send it to you.
It's all good.
I don't know where it went. It got lost in the mail. You know?
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to check the mail anyway.
But that was, you were in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Right? Because you went to that Limitless conference for all the entrepreneurs and business owners and things like that, right?
It was a pretty crazy lineup. There was like 30 world-renowned entrepreneurs, people that I've studied for years, and people that you've studied for years and that we look up to, and it was just really cool.
It's awesome, man.
Super cool. Ton of value.
Awesome. Good. Well, hopefully we can dive into some of that value today.
Yeah, for sure. It was crazy just kind of sitting back and watching them all, because everybody comes from a different background, and what I noticed is a lot of them are in different industries. They're all crushing it. And so kind of what I was looking for this weekend is a common theme between them all. I had my team there, I had some people there, and I was kind of just looking at it from a different perspective, because obviously I know a lot of the value they bring. But I was trying to figure out what they all have in common. And it seems like looking at them all, they all have this unbreakable mindset, and they're all naturally programmed for abundance. And the crazy part is I don't think a lot of them came from an abundant background. Mm-hmm. And so if I had to ask you, because I think that you didn't necessarily come from an abundant background, yet you're very similar. And so how would you say that somebody goes about developing something like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Especially like you said, like I didn't come from an abundant background where I didn't have a family that even looked at money in an abundantly way. It was always scarcity, right? Everything was always scarcity, and weren't bad people. Like I said, always rich in love, but that was one thing that was always scarce, was our financial situation. But another thing that you mentioned a second ago, you said they all seemed like they were naturally that way. And I don't think a single person was naturally that way, because I don't think people are born thinking abundantly, or I don't think people are born unbreakable. I think one of the reasons people become unbreakable, or at least they seem unbreakable, because nobody at the end of the day is actually unbreakable, but the reason they seem that way is because I feel like they're able to put themselves through more pain than anyone could ever put them through. Right? So like if I can put myself through more amounts of pain, whether it's in the gym, whether it's the amount of hours that I'm working, whether it's, whatever it might be, if I can put myself through more pain than what other people can put me through, then all of a sudden everyone else loses leverage on me, because I already know that I can output myself through pain than them, if that makes sense.
So are you saying that you would choose to intentionally put yourself through the hard situation to kind of develop that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that you even develop the mental capacity, like that mental toughness side of things, is just intentionality through the adversity. Like I think most people, when they go through adversity, it just kind of hits them, right? Yeah. And they're not ready for it. They're not aware that it's coming. And I think one of the things that separates those who go on to become successful in any arena, whether it's sports or business, whatever it might be, is they're intentional about growing through that adversity. Like they really want to make sure that as they go through that adversity, they come out better on the other side. And so it's not like the adversity happened, they didn't learn anything from it. The adversity happens, they say, all right, this is an opportunity for me to grow. In order for me to get to the next level, I got to first face this devil. And so they look at the devil in front of them and say, okay, how do I get better? How can I grow? And how do I make it so the next time this adversity comes, it doesn't even affect me because I've gotten so good that this adversity no longer has strength over me anymore. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. But at the end of the day, we're all human, right? And so we all go through it. We all have bad days. I guess it's, how you handle those bad days. But what about like when you're coming up in entrepreneurship, or maybe you've already made it in entrepreneurship? A lot of the people on stage, talked about they're pretty vulnerable, and they talked about, the days where they dealt with imposter syndrome and self-doubt and just, feeling like they should quit sometimes.
Yeah.
How would you say that you move forward on those days? Is it maybe that you're not operating out of your feelings?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. But emotions are always going to be there. I think there's what you want to do, and then there's what you need to do. And to be honest with you, what you want to do oftentimes is never what you need to do. And so I think the most successful people in the world are not people who are always motivated. Like, I know for myself, I'm probably one of the most ambitiously lazy people that you'll ever meet, right? Like, I'm not always motivated in any way. I've just have learned how to get myself to do motivated things even when I'm not motivated. And it's not because I want to, it's because I fall back on my routines. And I'm very routine oriented. And so one of the things that I've done is I routined every area of my life that I don't want to do. Right? Like, nobody wants to wake up early. So guess what? I built a routine around it. Nobody wants to work the first thing they do, and nobody wants to work right away when they wake up. Well, guess what? We built a routine around it. I don't like going to the gym every single morning, but guess what? I made it a part of my routine. And so I rely on my routines so that way I don't have to think. Because, a lot of times you hear people say like, oh, you got to have discipline. You got to have discipline. You got to have discipline. Discipline means that it's a 50-50 choice. You're either choosing not to or you're choosing to. I don't like to rely on discipline. I like to remove discipline from the equation. So that way it's just, what's the next step in my day? All right, I got step 1, which is I wake up. Step 2, I do an hour of working on my business just because I'm the most creative the first thing when I wake up in the morning. Step 3 is I work out. Step 4, I put in work in my business. And so I just made it step 1, 2, 3, 4. And I know that I can't get to 4 without the other steps. So I try to make a routine around everything that I don't want to do so that way I can actually get myself to do it. Because a lot of times I just won't end up doing it.
Yeah, no, I fall guilty of that sometimes too. You seem pretty optimistic, and at least in the time that I've known you, a couple of years, you've always been pretty optimistic. But let's say you're a glass half empty type of person, because we always have those friends that are looking at the worst case scenarios. They're kind of negative. How would you say you go from being that person to shifting your mindset to thinking like a glass half full type of person?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I would say, naturally, I'm more of a glass half empty type of person, actually. I think
mask it well.
Yeah, I mask it well. And I think most people think I mask it well just because I always appear so positive. But I'm always a worst case scenario type of person, right? Like, I'm always looking at the worst case scenario. I'm always looking at the half or the glass half empty, not because I'm trying to be negative, but I always try to figure out what is the worst possible scenario. What is everything that can go wrong? And then I use it strategically to my advantage. And so when you have someone who might naturally be a half a glass empty type of person, that there's actually an advantage there. Don't get me wrong. There's a huge advantage to always seeing the glass full. But now you can almost be so optimistic that things happen and you're not ready for those things to happen. But the person that's a glass half full type of person, they're sitting there thinking, all right, there's negativity here. And I don't want to shape it as negativity, but if I know what the negativity is, now I can create strategic strategies to overcome that negativity so that way it doesn't affect the goal in which I'm trying to hit. Okay, so naturally, let's just say a goal pops up. The optimist thinks, oh, we're going to go hit the goal. It's going to be great, yada, yada, yada. And then they get punched in the face with the adversity. On the other side, the half empty type of guy or person, they throw out the goal and they're like, all right, well, what is everything that could go wrong? Not because I want to be negative, but so that way I could be proactive and pre-plan, so that way I can overcome and create a strategy for executing even when all the negative happens. There's actually a book by Jocko, I forgot what the book is, I think it's Extreme Ownership, where he talks about where they were about to go on a mission and they did not account for the weather. And so they had to cancel the mission because the team lead didn't account for the weather. And so the mission got delayed, and it ended up leaving a whole bunch of families in jeopardy, a whole bunch of civilians that ended up dying and getting killed and hurt. Versus if they would have just proactively said, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? Worst thing that can happen is there could be something that goes wrong in the weather. And if something happens that goes wrong in the weather, then what? Then what's our strategy to still accomplish the mission? And so you're basically looking at everything that could go wrong in advance, so that way you can proactively come up with solutions. So when it does pop up, you're ready for it. But if it doesn't pop up at all, right, you're just smooth sailing.
Right. Shown up over prepared, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's just identify the holes and then create solutions. So, you're identifying the holes and then you create solutions. So it's not like you're looking at everything negatively. It's just that you're looking at it from a negative perspective, just so that way you can create a solution. So I think the half empty person can actually use that to their advantage if they're not a negative Nancy.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that completely. But let's say there's the glass half empty person that's trying to bring a little bit more positivity into their life, because naturally they just see the rain always, right? Even when the sky is sunny. So, do you think that positive affirmations and positive self-talk, do you think that can help, and do you think that's important to success?
So I think there's two sides of this. Okay, there's the cheesy cliche side where you just say affirmations and all your dreams are going to come true.
Scream about the stars, and then all of a sudden you wake up in a new Bugatti.
If I just scream I'm in a Bugatti every day, I'm going to end up in a Bugatti. And that is just such BS. Okay, it's not accurate at all. But I do think there's a lot of positive from it. And the way I looked at it is, let's say I'm saying my affirmations every single day. Is there anything bad that comes from it? No. So that means that there's only opportunity for good to come from it. And even if good doesn't come from it, bad's not coming from it. And so I say my affirmations every single day, not because I think it's going to solve all my problems or anything like that, but the way I look at it is this, okay? What dominates your thinking will determine the outcome of your life. And so if I can create what dominates my thinking, then I can determine the outcome of my life. And whatever you think about the most, you will move towards. Okay. Right. And so what I try to do is every single morning I go over my affirmations, and I say my affirmations as if I already accomplished it. Like, I'm so happy and grateful that I had $100 million net worth by the age of 30. I'm so happy and grateful that I had $1 billion net worth by 2030. Okay. Right. So these are part of my affirmations. It's not going to solve the problem, but guess what? When I say that out loud, do you think that gets me excited? Do you think that puts me in a better state?
For sure.
Do you think that makes me happier? Absolutely. But then what also starts to happen is I start to program my subconscious mind. There's only a couple ways that you can program your subconscious mind. Number one is through repetition, right? So you can use repetition, whether it's repetition of affirmation, right? And or repetition of environment. So if you're constantly in an environment that's always preaching the same thing or saying the same thing, that repetition will eventually program your subconscious mind. That's why they always say guard your friends. And or repetition in affirmation. So by me saying that all the time, okay, I'm programming my subconscious. Another way that you can do it is through meditation, right? This is something I've actually been wanting to do, but I just haven't got myself to do, to be upfront with you. But
I'm pretty ADD to meditate. I keep trying, but I feel you there.
Oh, for sure. I've heard so many people talk so good about it. I just haven't gotten myself to do it, right? But the meditation and the visualization, and then also I've heard being hypnotized helps with the subconscious as well, right? Which I haven't done that part either, okay? But on the affirmation side of things, if I'm every single day saying I'm so happy and grateful that as if I already accomplished it, whether it's in my health, whether it's in my business, whether it's in my relationship, whether it's financially, which by the way, I do affirmations for all of those things. I do affirmations to love my wife more. I do affirmations for being a better dad. I do affirmations for doing better financially, being a better leader, being a better communicator, being better even on social medias, and just programming my mind to go find the resources so I can get better on a social media platforms. Like all of it, anything that's important to me, any area in which I want to scale, I make it part of my affirmations. And like I said, it's not going to bridge the gap and get me there, but it keeps my mind focused on it. Because if I can program my subconscious mind to think about $1 billion, well, now guess what? There's something part of your mind called the RAS, your subconscious. So the RAS stands for reticular activating system. I know a lot of people have heard like Ed Milet and things like that talk about it, which he does the best job at talking about it. But the RAS is the reticular activating system, and it's part of the subconscious mind. And what it is, it's a filter that filters in what's important to you and it filters out what's not. And so let's say I'm saying I'm going to be a billionaire, I'm going to be a billionaire, I'm going to be a billionaire. And I condition my subconscious mind to truly believe that. And now I'm thinking about it all the time. Like I'm literally thinking about becoming a billionaire all the time. Now that RAS, which is the filter, is going to filter in the people, the resources, the knowledge, right? For me to find it. And it's not like it just goes and finds it for you, but it allows you to see it. Okay. It allows you to see it. Like for instance, when my dad got cancer, when he first got cancer, I didn't even know what cancer was because I was so young. But now I started seeing everything that happened to do with cancer. It wasn't that the cancer, commercials or the cancer, publications or whatever they're called weren't out there. It's just that I didn't know what it was. It wasn't important to me, so I never saw it. But then cancer became important to me because my dad, so I started noticing everything that happened to do with cancer, how to heal it, how to cure it, the whole 9 yards, right? Well, that's how your RAS works. It filters in what's important. So if becoming a billionaire is important, then all of a sudden it filters it in. If becoming healthy is important, then all of a sudden it filters the things that are necessary for you to start becoming healthy. Does it do the work for you? Absolutely not. But it helps you dial in and focus in on the resources in order to get it. So I would say that's a huge part of affirmations, and on how it makes a big difference is, like I said, it just helps you program your mind to start looking for and finding what's important, and it helps you filter out what's not.
Yeah, that's huge. I think a lot of people don't realize that they're subconsciously programmed, and that their subconscious can't determine between what's reality and what's fake. And so a lot of people are operating off of other people's beliefs. Hence why a lot of people who are raised in a broke household, what happens is they typically end up broke. But let's say you're somebody who is that person, right? And that doesn't make you a bad person, but let's say you're the person who was raised in a less fortunate household like myself. And I wouldn't say that I was raised in a poor family or a wealthy family, but I was pretty middle class, and I was surrounded by a lot of negativity. And so if you're that person, how would you go about reprogramming your mind for abundance?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I mean, I would look at your mind as a computer. So anything can be deleted and anything can be reprogrammed. That's how I look at my mind. Is I try to look at my mind like a computer as much as I possibly can, where nothing is guaranteed, right? Anything that's on my desktop right now, I can remove and delete, and I can also add to it. So if you look at your mind kind of like the desktop of your computer, put on it what you want and take off what you don't. And I know it's not as simple as saying that out loud, but if we can put an image behind it, it makes it a lot easier, where it's just Control Alt Delete, add, download, whatever it might be, right? And so I think number one is having the awareness of the thoughts that you're thinking, okay? Mm-hmm. So if I'm aware of a thought being a negative thought or a positive thought, just that awareness alone allows me to say, okay, that was a negative thought. I don't want these negative thoughts in my life, and so I'm going to reject it, okay? So almost think about it like this. Like, let's say I was a door-to-door salesperson.
That would be terrible.
Exactly, right? Like, so let's say I was a door-to-door salesperson, which you're right, would be terrible. But let's say I went to the same door 5 times, and they said, no, I'm not interested 5 times. Are you going to continue to go back to that door, or are you going to go find a different door?
Find a different door.
You're going to go find a different door. So I think our mind works the same way, where it's if a thought tries to enter but always gets rejected, eventually that thought's going to stop trying to enter.
Yeah.
And so I think the more aware of the thoughts that we don't want, the more we are aware of the thoughts that we don't want, and the more we reject it, the more they'll stop showing up. And so obviously that takes time. It doesn't all happen at once. But every single time a negative thought pops up, I'll say, hey, I reject that thought. That's not who I am. I don't want anything to do with that thought. Like, I'll just reject it. No, like, I don't accept that thought. Go away, never come back. And it almost sounds weird saying it out loud, but like, that's the thought process that goes through my mind, is I try to reject the thought. And then eventually that thought stops knocking on the door because it knows that I'm not interested in allowing it to enter my mind. Does that make sense? Yeah. So number one, I think there's that awareness. And the reason that's so important is, you look at your thoughts, right? Every thought you think sends a vibration through your body, and that vibration sends you in a direction, good or bad. So if you think, I don't want to do anything today, well then guess what? I just sent the lazy vibration through my body, and guess what? You'll probably find me on the couch watching a movie, which I'll probably quote the entire thing.
100% of the time.
For those of you who don't know, I'm a movie buff, and I quote every single movie. But that's a negative thought. I wouldn't even consider it a negative thought. It's just the thought that I chose for that day. So I'm very aware of these thoughts because I know every single time I think something, I send a vibration through my body, and that vibration sends me in a direction. And so if I think one positive thought and I send positive vibrations, which leads to positive actions, and then I think one negative thought, which sends negative vibrations and leads to negative actions, well, 1 minus plus 1 minus 1 equals 0. So now I'm just exactly where I want to be. So I need to have more positive thoughts than I do negative thoughts. And the only way that I can really start to make sure that I have more positive thoughts than negative thoughts is if I'm aware of the thoughts. And then I start to reject the thoughts that I don't want. Okay.
Right.
So I think a big part of it is, it's just basic math. 10 positive thoughts, 5 negative thoughts, I move forward today. 5 positive thoughts, 5 negative thoughts, I'm in the exact same place. And so the more aware I become of the positive and negative thoughts, the more I can control if I'm moving forward that day or if I'm moving backwards that day, right?
Yeah.
So number 1 is just the pure awareness of the thoughts that you're thinking. Number 2, I would say, is the willingness to accept that the thoughts that you have might not be true, right? The beliefs that you have, because you might believe something to be true and then come to find out that it's not.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many times that's affected me in business. And that's why I always ask myself the question, like, what do I believe to be true that isn't, that's keeping me from leveling up in life? Because if we believe it to be true, then we're not going to find an answer because we already think we have the answer.
100%.
That hurts you a ton. And so the willingness to accept change and say, okay, not every thought that I think is necessarily true. Not everything that I believe is necessarily true. And then you open yourself up to learn and get better. And you open yourself up to have your thought process challenged in order to improve. That's going to be step number 2. And then number 3 is total immersion, total immersion. And I don't even know how to say it, but we'll just roll with it. For those of you who are listening, you
said
get
it
my
right.
point.
You said it right.
You guys, I'm working on my grammar.
That's
okay?
That's a first.
But total immersion. So like, for instance, if I'm trying to learn Spanish, what's the best way to learn Spanish? Go take a Spanish class or go to Mexico?
Go to Mexico, be in the environment.
Exactly.
Sure.
So if I moved to Mexico and I lived there for 5 months, I'm going to learn more Spanish in 5 months than if I took a Spanish course for 3 years, because there's total immersion. So how do you shift your mindset? How do you shift your thought process? Total immersion.
Proximity.
Proximity. Like, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make in business and entrepreneurship and health and anything is they're in the environment for a portion of their day and then they go back to another environment that doesn't serve them. So if I'm in Mexico for 1 hour and I'm back in the United States for the other 23 hours, am I going to learn Spanish as fast? Nope. No. But if I go to Mexico for an entire 24 hours, I'm going to learn more Spanish in that 24 hours than the hour. So total immersion makes all the difference.
For sure.
So an analogy I also like to use is like a seed analogy. Okay, like if I plant the right seed into the right soil, incredible soil, but it's only in the soil for 2 hours, is anything going to grow?
No.
You have to leave the seed in the soil long enough to be able to break through the seed, start to grow roots, and then it has to be in the soil long enough for it to break through the ground and actually start to grow. Well, it's the same thing with us. So if we are not totally immersed into an environment that serves the thought processes in which we want to have, then it's going to make it very, very difficult to succeed. Which is why, I believe that you have to isolate to elevate. You got to isolate yourself from everyone who's not where you want to be, as hard as that is. Even the people you love and care about the most, you have to isolate yourself from everyone who's not where you want to be, and you have to fully immerse yourself into environments where there's a lot of people who have what you want, who have the marriages that you want, who have the health that you want, that have the business or financial situation that you want. You have to immerse yourself into those environments and make sure that there's nothing affecting that soil.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that seed analogy. One thing I would say is I think people would hear that and they think, oh, now I just got to go be around a bunch of wealthy people and then all of a sudden I'm going to be wealthy, right? But I want to add to it. I think that if you were to put it in the soil for long enough, but the watering it is you putting in the work.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
So you got to continue watering it too, because I don't want people to think, oh, I just need to go be around a bunch of wealthy people, and then all of a sudden money just starts flowing into my bank account, which that would be nice, but that's not how it works.
Yeah,
so.
and you're exactly right there, because it's like this. It's not even, once again, it's not being around the wealthy people or being around the fit person that makes you fit. It's that they make you uncomfortable with where you're at.
Right.
So like, for instance, if I'm around a whole bunch of people that are ripped and I'm not ripped, either A, I'm going to feel so uncomfortable that I leave, or B, I can take the medicine and go get fit with them.
Yep.
Right? Same thing with wealthy people. When you surround yourself with successful entrepreneurs, well, then you feel like you got to level up because you're the person that makes the least amount of money, whose business is doing the worst, and it makes you want to get better. But I think most people, they have such a hard time not being the best in the room, and so they go to another room that comforts their insecurities, right? As hard as it is, I would rather be in a room with a whole bunch of people that are significantly better than me, where I'm just a student and I can just learn, because now the only way is up in that room.
Yeah.
All right. But if I leave because I'm insecure, all these people are doing better than me, I want to be number one or whatever it might be. Right. Well, that's just your ego at work. And
Right.
your ego is not your amigo in that situation.
For sure. And, on that same subject, I was actually talking to my agents about this last night. I think it's important because a lot of people don't have the privilege to be able to go and surround themselves in those higher identity environments. Like for myself, I grew up in a small mountain town with 5,000 people in the population, So like, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing 10 people you knew.
Yeah.
But for people like that, what I told my agents, because a lot of them were saying, hey, I'm not around the environment. I don't have access to these type of people. And I said, you don't have to, right? I didn't. Mm-hmm. I just found the people that I looked up to, the 3 to 5 people that I looked up to, and I wanted to model them, right? And then I put them in my ear every single day.
Yeah.
So they were my best friends. I met Andy Frisella this weekend, who is, I would say, the number one guy who's responsible for shifting my life the way that it's been going for the past 6 years. I told him, I said, dude, straight up, you changed my life. You've been in my ear for the last 6 years. You changed my entire life.
Yeah.
And that's because he was in my ear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. You make them your association. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, people that I've always studied was like Ed Milet, even Patrick Bet-David. I'm studying John Maxwell, John Wooden, just people who've done incredible things in business. Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, you name it, Jeff Bezos. Like, I've studied all these people and I made them my association. I might not know, like I know Ed Milet. I don't know Steve Jobs because he's no longer with us, right? I've never met Jeff. I've never met Elon. I've never met these people. So I don't have a relationship with them, but I've listened to all their stuff so much. I've read so many things about them where I almost feel like I know them, and I made them my association in a sense. Yeah. Right? Like coming up in entrepreneurship, I had Ed Milet in my ear so much that like I can mimic his voice. I could say everything the way he was going to say because I just copied him. And, I think it's okay to be a copycat as long as you copy the right cat. But eventually you copy the right cat and then you can personalize it and make it your own.
Right.
But I agree with you. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like in the same room like you and I are right now. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just you're just listening to John Maxwell's book.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And now all of a sudden John Maxwell becomes your association that week. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe you're listening to John Wooden on leadership, and now John Wooden becomes your mentor that week. He becomes your number one association that week. Because think about it, let's say I'm in my car an hour a day, right? Yep. For let's say 5 days a week. That means that I'm spending 5 quality hours with John Maxwell.
Yeah.
Right?
Pretty legit.
I'm spending 5 quality hours with maybe Alex Hormozi if I'm listening to his podcast. So even though I might not be in the same room as him, I still probably spent more time with him than 99% of the people in my life that week.
Yeah.
So who do you think is my number one association that week?
John Maxwell.
Exactly.
That's a good association to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, and I think you also have to intentionally disassociate with the people who don't have the results you want.
For sure.
Right. Which sometimes people have a hard time doing that, but it's one of those harsh realities. But yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit. One thing that I respect about you, and also I noticed it with everybody who's on stage, is they're just super mentally tough. Like, they're extremely mentally tough. And I know that, in my opinion, I think that you have to build that. Have you always been mentally tough, or did you have to go and build that? And then how did you build that, if so?
Yeah. Absolutely not. I don't think I was always mentally tough. I was like, came out as a baby. Mentally tough baby. I don't think it goes that way.
Right.
I think mental toughness is forged in the fire. Right. Like, I think it's forged through adversity. And like I talked about earlier, it's intentionally growing through it. Like, that's how you build the mental toughness, is you intentionally get better because of it. And then you start to look at the adversity as small, right? Like, for instance, when people bring me adversity today, I consider it small just because I became a bigger person.
Right. So back in the day,
it was big. Exactly. Right. So like, for instance, I have people bring me adversity, like, how do I get through? And it's the end of the world. And back in the day, I thought the same exact thing. But now I've dealt with it so many different times, it appears this small little issue. And so as you get better and as you grow, all of a sudden the adversity is small. Like, there's no such thing as big problems. There's just small people. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm not trying to call people small in like an arrogant and or disrespectful way. It's just that if you think a problem's big, it's because you're being too small to handle it. So we have to get better. Right?
Intentionally.
Exactly. And so one of the things that actually got me to execute through the adversity, though, because, as you're in the adversity, it sucks. Like, it's horrible. Nobody wants to be in the fire sitting there burning to death. And so for me, you have to stay motivated through it. So there's a couple things that kept me motivated through all the hard times. Okay. The first one was just being my dad. My dad battled cancer for 14 years before he passed away. Was told 5 times that he had 3 months to live. And I literally saw him hooked up to IVs and in the hospital and not being able to feel his feet and struggling and, barely being able to go to the bathroom at certain points. And especially up into the last days of his life where we were literally helping him with everything. And so for me, I always just compared the hard.
Right.
And I realized that I was privileged to do what I get to do that day. So like, for instance, if there was, like from a business perspective, with your prospect list or your phone calls or whatever it is, right? Do you think my dad would rather be hooked up to a hospital bed, or do you think you'd rather be able to make a phone call?
Make a phone call.
So I'm blessed to be able to make a phone call.
For sure.
Right? And so, do you think I would rather be hooked up to a hospital bed, or do you think I would rather work a 16-hour day?
Yeah.
I guarantee you my dad would have rather worked a 16-hour day than been hooked up to a hospital bed. So I compared the hard, and every single time I compared the hard, I realized that I was blessed and I had the opportunity to work 16 hours. And that's one of the things that motivated me through. That's one of the things that kept me going through those hard times, is I just compared the hard, because I was like, what type of, who am I to complain? Like, who am I to have an excuse? Who am I to complain? Like, there's people literally that would do anything that they can to have the opportunity in this country. There's people that would do anything they can to have the opportunity to get out of that hospital bed and go pursue a goal, pursue a dream. And most people just take it for granted. And so for me, I always just compared it. I'm like, man, I got it easy. I'm blessed. 16-hour day. He doesn't even get to work a 16-hour day.
Yeah.
And so that's what kept me going through it. And I think it's one of the ways that I forged the mental toughness, is because I got myself to work through the adversity. And then I realized afterwards it wasn't that bad. And then I recognized the fact that I worked through it, and I was like, I'm kind of a beast. And then I started to build my confidence, and then I started to build this strong reputation with myself that there's nothing too challenging that I can't overcome.
Yeah. Huge respect. That's a crazy story, but it makes a lot of sense, And I think, like you said, a lot of people I guess they just take it for granted, right? Take the life that we have for granted, especially here in America.
Yeah.
And that's probably because of limited exposure to other areas in the world where, they have to go and fetch a bucket of water and filter it out if they're lucky, right? And we just have everything kind of handed to us. We have a $2,000 iPhone, it's crazy. And so the more that we can realize that we have, that we're blessed, I think the more that we can go.
Well, think about it. Most businesses in America are owned by immigrants.
Yeah.
And then they employ all the Americans.
Yeah, it's because they know the opportunity that they have at their hand, and they take full advantage of it.
Yeah, and they didn't go through everything that they went to not to capitalize on the opportunity.
Right. So let's shift gears again. Let's say you're the person who is ambitious, right? And maybe you don't have the environment, you don't really even know why you're ambitious, but you saw a video and you're fired up. You're ready to change your life. But everybody that you're surrounded by your whole entire life is constantly projecting their limiting beliefs on you. They're telling you, no, you can't get this done. No, you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to be successful. Look where you were raised. How do you go about, and I don't know if you had to deal with this or not. I did for sure.
Yeah.
But how would you say that you go about disassociating and or protecting yourself, right? Instead of adopting their limiting beliefs, which I believe they're actually just projecting their own onto you.
Yeah.
It's not that you're not going to be able to accomplish it. It's that they believe that they can't.
Exactly.
But how would you go about protecting yourself and moving forward with the people you love and care about? Typically the ones bringing you down.
Yeah. To be honest with you, that's the hardest, because these are the people that you love more than anything in the world.
Right. And most of the time you're trying to go and win to provide for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Craziest part.
Like, I have loved ones in my life that are my best friends in the entire world, but at the beginning stages of trying to build a business and trying to grow as a human being, I had to disassociate and I had to disconnect. And it was the hardest thing in the entire world, because I love these people more than anything and they're my best friends, but I had to, because I had to go work on me. Right? It's like, I can't help someone if they're drowning if I'm also drowning. So first I had to go learn to be a lifeguard in my financial situation, right? Before I go back and try to save everyone that can't swim. And that was kind of my focus. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not doing this selfishly. I'm doing this selflessly, right? Like I want to help these people because they're my blood. I want to help these people because I love them more than anything in this world. But I can't do it if I don't know how to swim. I can't do it if I haven't been trained to be able to go back and help them. So I had to isolate myself. This is why I always say like isolate to elevate. Like I mentioned earlier, I had to isolate myself in order to elevate myself. So that way I was a strong enough swimmer to go back and help them. Right. And so while you're in that process though, if they are negative or whatever it be, number one, I would just ask yourself, and I don't think you should ever be rude. I don't think you should ever be disrespectful. I think if I could change something, like I think I was maybe a little bit arrogant at times when I would communicate with these people, and I wish I wouldn't have been, just because I almost, how do I say this? It almost appeared like I was talking down because I was trying to change my life and they weren't. Right. And I wish I wouldn't have done that because I think it probably hurt some feelings. And I've since patched those comments, right?
Part of growth.
Yeah, it's part of the growth. Like I wasn't as mature back then with how I handled things. But I think you should love these people and you respect them no matter what. I don't think you should ever disrespect. I don't think there's ever a reason to be rude to someone, disrespectful to them, even if they're rude and disrespectful to you, which is typically what happens when you're trying to start a business, right? Which is unbelievable, but it's just the reality. But I've just never believed in being rude and disrespectful. At least I don't believe that to this day. I think you should just treat everyone respectfully, and I think you should go do you, boo-boo, right? And go get better and go focus on leveling up. And then also just realize that these people, if they're not where you want to be, I'm not saying their opinions don't matter, but you shouldn't be allowing it to influence your decision making, right? Like if you don't have the marriage that I want, I'm not going to give you the ability to influence my marriage, because the only thing that you can possibly teach me how to do is get to where you're at. And so even though you might be thinking, oh, like I have made the mistakes so you can avoid those mistakes, you still don't know how to get to where I want to be. So even though you might have made mistakes and you're trying to teach me so I avoid those mistakes, I'll take them with a grain of salt. But the fact of the matter is I might listen to you to avoid your mistakes, but listening to you might still point me in a different direction in which I don't want to be.
Yeah.
So my philosophy has always been like, you have to have exactly what it is that I want, or else I'm not taking advice there.
Yeah. Critical thinking.
Exactly.
We got to like make common sense common again. I feel like a lot of people don't do that. They just immediately adopt whatever information's thrown their way.
Yeah.
And then they end up in the same spot and wonder why.
Yeah.
But
and by the way, I listened to something the other day, and I can't take credit for this. I don't know who said it, to be honest with you, but I just thought it was so powerful. He said, there's a big difference between day ones and day twos. And there's nothing like a day two, right? And you hear like a lot, especially in the millennial generation, that was my day one. He's my day one. She's my day one. They've been with me from the beginning. They're my day one. They're my day one. But your day ones are typically chosen for you.
Yep.
Your day ones are chosen by the neighborhood that you were forced to live in because your parents chose the neighborhood.
Right.
Your day ones are chosen by the schools you went to because your parents chose which schools you went to. Right? Your day ones were decided by the environment that you were forced to work in because you didn't have the skill sets or the abilities to choose the environment you got to work in. So your day ones are typically chosen for you. But your day twos, you get to choose. You get to choose your day twos. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing like a day two, because when you choose your day two typically has the same dream, the same ambition, the same goals, the same drive, that they want the same things. They have the same levels of integrity. They believe in the same morals and values and you believe in. They align with your future. And so I think just because somebody has a common past doesn't mean you need to have a common future.
Agreed.
Right? You can love them from a distance. And if you have a common past, that means they're probably your day one. But I think we need to graduate from day ones to day twos, and the day ones that get upset with you for choosing the day twos, those are just the people that aren't growing. And once again, it's not that you were rude or disrespectful. You just have to say, hey, listen, I love you, but unless you make the decision that you're going to grow and get better, there's not really a lot for us to have in common. Right. Like, have you ever gone back and hung out with people that we used to hang out with before? Like I said, it's not that I don't love them. It's like
there's nothing to talk about.
Exactly. What we used to get along about, like, I partied, I did all that stuff.
Right.
So our relationships were built all about that. So then all of a sudden we hang out again. There's nothing to talk about because we don't have any of the same things in common anymore.
Yeah, and it'll come across as bragging when really you're just talking about your reality.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But your reality is at such a higher level than theirs because you've been intentionally working, intentionally growing.
Yeah.
And so, now it comes across as arrogance, which it's actually not. It's just, what else do we communicate about?
Yeah. Like I was out to dinner the other day with a buddy of mine who makes about $8 million a year. It's net income, owns a business, the whole nine yards. Hadn't seen him in a long, long time. Right. Only actually hung out with him like once or twice before that. But then we're at dinner and we spoke for an hour and 45 minutes with no awkward pauses. We were just conversating as if we'd known each other our entire lives because our values were just the same.
Right.
It was like, what are your health hacks? What are your business hacks? Like, what is the number one thing that took you from 4 million to 8 million? What was your like, and we were just talking about all these things. What are some things that you do to strengthen your marriage while running a multi-million-dollar 8-figure business? And we were just bouncing ideas off of each other. Like I said, we've only hung out like 1 or 2 times before that. We didn't have like this crazy friendship forever. Right. But we were able to talk for an hour and 45 minutes straight with no pauses because we were so intrigued in the same outcomes for our life.
Yeah, that's legit. You know, and it's not to say that some people don't have legit day ones, right?
Oh, for sure.
But the majority of the time, typically it's your day ones that are the ones bringing you down, hating on you, and just trying to rain on your parade.
And I have day ones, by the way, that are the most supportive people in the entire world.
Which is epic.
Yeah.
Right.
Like there's not all that way, but I have a couple of day ones that are like, dude, I'm so proud of you. It's awesome seeing you doing this or that. And by the way, it's vice versa. Like they might not be in the business space, but they moved up at their job.
Right.
They just got their master's degree, whatever it is. So it's not an economic thing. And I think most people think it's an economic thing.
Right.
It's are you contributing and encouraging? Like that's what it is. It's not, hey,
money,
do you make
money's
more?
Surface level.
Exactly. Like most people think, oh, it's an economic thing. No, I have people that just bring me happiness because our relationship is awesome, but we're growing in different areas.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'll give you an example. My brother, he's climbed his way up, worked super, super hard, got into the fire department, went through hell and back to get into the fire department because it's so hard to get into.
Yeah. And it's like one of the most noble jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have.
We're growing in 2 different areas, but it doesn't mean we're both not growing. Right. So now our conversations are about growth. Like, hey, how are you growing here? How are you growing there? Like we're literally having conversations over dinner about how we're growing into certain careers. Like, dude, how did you overcome that? What was that like as you were going from, this to this part of the fire department when you're getting your EMT? Like it's still growth oriented because we're both just trying to get better. He's trying to get better in his career. I'm trying to get better in my career. And so we're both still trying to get better. And that's what I want people. It's not an economic thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I agree. He's awesome, by the way, too.
Yeah.
So
best person in the entire world.
Yeah, he's legit. So let's go back to the day ones, right? The day ones that are raining on your parade, that are, hating on you, which is crazy because typically if it's your day ones, you want to bring them up with you. But that's just not how it works out the majority of the time. So did you ever harness all those negative, statements, all that hate? Did you harness that and use that as fuel? Because I think that could be such a powerful tool, and not to do it and say, hey, whatever, right? Screw you. But I don't know how clean this podcast is, but we're going to keep it clean. So
we're ranked clean on
we're awesome. We're ranked clean. So basically, did you harness that and use that as fuel to help you level up?
Yeah, to be completely honest, and this isn't politically correct in any way, shape, or form, but I've never been motivated by like proving people. I've never been motivated by the fluff. I've always been motivated by you telling me I can't do something.
Same.
Like the number one way to get me to just go want to eat your lunch is like call me out, tell me I can't do something. That's fuel to my fire.
Right.
And so I have a hit list, if that makes sense, of every person. I would never go back because that means that they won. I was thinking about them all this time. Yeah. Like I don't think you should ever go back and be like, I told you so. Like, well, that means they won.
Right. The best thing to do, even if you do go back, you can be super respectful. Yeah. And that's almost more gratifying.
Well, I look for every twig, right? Like anything that's flammable, I'm throwing in my fire.
Yeah.
Right. Like the fact, I remember back in the day, the fact that I looked at the gas price, boom, I'm throwing it in, right? Remember that back in the day when you would do the money math because you're like, all right, I got $150 in my account, right?
Yes,
this 100, I'm going to get paid on this day. And then you do like the gas mileage. Like I get 15 miles to the gallon. So if I put in 4 gallons, I can go 60 miles, which means I can go here, back, which will get me to work the next 2 days. And then I can use the other dollar figure to buy myself some food. Like you do the math, right? Fuel in the fire. Somebody says no, fuel in the fire. Somebody says I'm not interested, fuel in the fire. Somebody says you can't do it, fuel in the fire, right? Like anything that I possibly could, anything that was flammable, small, big, right? A random Instagram comment from somebody that I've never met before, who honestly, it doesn't even affect me even a little bit.
Right.
Throwing it in.
Yeah.
Right. Because when they read Forbes one day, they'll know on their own. So like those are the thoughts where I'm just looking for anything to add fuel. Right. And I'm never going to go back and be like, right. Like I don't believe in that. but I do use everything that I can to get me going. And by the way, when you have people in your life that are negative and naysayers, typically it's because A, they love you, right? And they've tried something before. They don't want you to get hurt. So that's oftentimes a big part of it. Like, I know when I first got into business and entrepreneurship, I had loved ones that were like, hey, just be careful. Like, I've been screwed. I've been burned before. So their intentions weren't bad. Their intentions were just to try to keep me safe.
Right.
Right. Then there's the other type of person who they're telling you not to try something because they're looking at their own capacity, like what you were talking about earlier. Because I don't think I can do it, I'm naturally going to transfer that limitation onto you, meaning I don't think you can do it. Right. And then number 3, I would say, like, and this is like those that are typically naysayers in this situation, they're just typically insecure. So they're insecure about you going and do something great with your life and then making them look bad for you actually doing something great. So a lot of times, though, it's not even a negative thing. It's not even a bad thing. It's just they're trying to protect you. They love you, whatever it might be. But then there's also those naysayer ones. Use that as fuel to your fire. Just don't go back and rub it in their face. And I've had some moments in my careers where it wasn't the most godly moments, where I did send them like an income or whatever it is, bought another house. And I wish I would have done it. It wasn't the most godly moment in my life, but sometimes I just needed it.
I think that's necessary for your growth to recognize the things that you did in the past and be like, dang, I was really immature back then. Let me grow up a little bit.
Bought my first house, told you, mother, right? Like, right? Wasn't the best moment. Wouldn't do it again, right? But we grow, we get better.
Yeah, for sure. I think it could also be used as fuel on the days where, you are going through it. Because like we talked about earlier, we all deal with, a lot or a little bit, whatever it is, the person. But all of us are going to deal with some level of self-doubt. All of us are going to deal with some level of adversity. All of us are going to go through it, right? And I think that if you can keep like a track record, I told my team, I said, hey, why don't you write down a notebook? Because sometimes you get in this position to where you can't get yourself to move.
And then every time you're stuck, go look back at every person that said something negative.
Exactly. I think you could use it as fuel. And, that might not work for everybody, but I think it could be a useful tool.
For sure.
But heck yeah, it's been a really good combo. What would you say is one final thought? If you had to leave somebody with a nugget, what would you say is one final thought?
I would just say, this might be multiple final thoughts.
Cool. Right? Let's hear them.
I would say you reap what you sow, but not in the same season. Right? Like, the day you plant the seed is not the day you get the fruit. So you might be working your butt off and you might have all these people that are saying negative things. Right? You might be working your butt off and you're in the middle of that adversity. But the day you plant the seed is not the day you get the fruit. And you will eventually reap what you sow, but you can't stop sowing.
Yeah.
Like, that's the big part of it, and another thought, another side of it is going back to the mindset side of things. If you plant oranges, you're not going to get avocados. So if you plant negativity, you're not going to get positivity.
Right.
If you plant scarcity, you're not going to get abundance.
Yeah.
All right. If you plant poverty, you're not going to get wealth. If you plant whatever it might be, right? Like, you just got to realize that whatever you plant is what's going to grow. So you are at where you're at in life because the thoughts you think, the decisions you've made, and the actions that you've taken. Or whether you like it or not, it's just the reality. Like, you thought to yourself, I'm going to listen to a podcast. You made the decision to click on the one that you're listening to right now, right? You made the decision, all right, I'm going to listen to the Leaders Only podcast. And then you went and clicked on it, which was the action. So you made a thought.
Good choice, by the way.
Thanks. Right? You made a thought, then you made a decision, and then you took action. So everything about your life is because of you, right? Like, if you're leading a business and it's not going well, as hard as it might be to swallow this pill, it's because of you, right? You thought something, then you made a decision, then you took action, and those actions is the sowing of the seed, and now you're reaping your actions from 3, 4, 5 months ago. Like, typically when something goes wrong in business or in someone's life, it's typically caused by what they were and or weren't doing 3, 4, 5 months ago.
Right.
Because they were planting 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, and it led to today's harvest, and it might be dead crops, right? Or it might be abundance.
Right.
And so I think if people are just aware that every action has an equal reaction and everything's cause and effect, they'll start to be a lot more aware of their actions. Right? Like, I'm fully aware that everything that I say triggers a thought in someone's mind. Like, if I say blue, what are you thinking about?
The sky.
Blue. If I say ocean, right, you're thinking about the ocean. If I say car, you're thinking about car. If I say Ford Raptor, you're thinking about your or my Ford Raptor.
Right.
Whichever one. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I triggered that. So that means that there's the cause, I said it, right? And there's the effect. You saw it in your mind. So everything's cause and effect. Everything is. Every action has an equal reaction. So we have to be very, very aware of our actions, because every action is going to lead to a reaction. And if you don't want that reaction, then you got to start governing and paying attention to your actions.
100%.
So that's what I'd say.
100%. And then it leads back to just personal accountability, which sometimes we don't want to do that. Just because, like you said, it is a hard pill to swallow. But I think the more people can be accountable to themselves and not just be proud of themselves when they're winning, but also recognize that when they're losing, it's most likely because of themselves. Even if they can come up with excuses of why it might be somebody else's fault, the more accountability we can take, the easier it's going to be for them to level up, right?
And by the way, in those moments, it's like, don't take it as discouraging. It's like, well, I'm here, so might as well fix it. I think, it's like when there's someone that's overweight in the gym. Yeah, there were some bad actions that led to them being overweight. But now they're in the gym.
Which is awesome.
Which is inspiring. So if right now you took some bad actions that's led to your current circumstances that aren't the greatest, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Just go take new action, and then when you win and you succeed, that's what's going to make your story inspiring. The inspiring story is not the person that started on top and stayed at the top.
Right.
The inspiring story is the person that went through trials and tribulations and then figured out a way to win and succeed and come out on the other end. So if somebody's in the midst of that and they're like, man, like if every action has an equal reaction and my reaction right now is awful, right? Like dwelling in it's not going to make anything better. So say, okay, well, I know that my past actions has led to my current state. My current state I'm not okay with. So how about moving forward, I just take good action. Boom. That's it. Like, don't sit on it. Don't think about it too long. And if you have people in your life that are like, oh, you did this, and they won't forgive you, right? Forgive yourself. Who cares what everyone else thinks? And then go get better. Just forgive yourself. That's what I think most people have the hardest time doing, is forgiving themselves. Forgive yourself for the actions that you took that weren't the greatest. Forgive yourself for the actions you never took at all. And just make the decision moving forward. You're going to be better. That's it.
Beating yourself up isn't going to get you closer to your goals.
Yeah. All it does is it makes you not want to execute.
Yeah.
So today's been good, man.
Yeah.
It's been really, really good.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Awesome.
Super blessed to be on again, and I look forward to more.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Well, thank you again for joining us. Guys, if you got something out of today's message, if you guys can do me a favor, if you can like, share, and subscribe, it mean the absolute world to us. And obviously we do all of this 100% complimentary. We don't run ads or commercials or anything like that. So if you could ever get something out of the show, if you could share it, comment, like, subscribe, all of it, it would mean the absolute world to us, because it's the only way for us to further our mission, which is to help more people and educate as many people as we can, so that way they can get better. So thank you guys again, and we'll see you guys next week. Talk to you guys later.